Have you ever been walking along, doing fine, and then suddenly your feet just stop? Your brain says go, your body says interesting suggestion, and your feet say, we're currently unavailable, please try us again later. Well, that's Parkinson's freezing. And if you've ever frozen in a doorway, in a crowd, while turning, or right when someone is waiting behind you, you know how scary and how frustrating it can be. Because freezing does not feel like hesitation, it does not feel like laziness, it does not feel like you just forgot how to walk. It feels like your brain sent the message, but your feet didn't open the email. So today we're going to talk about Parkinson's freezing, why your feet won't move, and I'm going to give you 5 mistakes that may be making freezing episodes worse. And stay with me until the end, because I'm going to give you the exact sentence that I would use to explain freezing to someone who thinks you're just stopping, hesitating, or not trying hard enough. Because my feet have resigned from the walking department, that might be accurate, but it probably won't help people understand what's actually happening. Yet.
Welcome to Living with Parkinson's. The good, the bad, and the reality. Real talk, real life, real community with Bryce Perry. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the broadcast. And if you're new here, my name is Bryce, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 40, and I've been living with it now for almost 16 years. Now, this week we're continuing our little mini-series on the Parkinson's moments that it can completely ruin your day. You know, we talked about off periods, we talked about sleep, we talked about dyskinesia, and today we're talking about freezing. You know that moment when you want to move, you intend to move, you know exactly where you want to go, but your feet do not cooperate. And I want to be clear about this right away. Freezing's real, and it's not a weakness, and it's not stubbornness, and it's not attention seeking, and it's definitely not someone just being dramatic in the middle of a doorway. Although, to be fair, Parkinson's does have a flair for blocking doorways like it owns the building. So let's get into these 5 mistakes that may make freezing worse, and more importantly, what we can start noticing. All right, mistake number 1 is thinking freezing is a choice. Now, this is probably the biggest one. From the outside, freezing can look confusing. You know, someone's walking, right? Then they stop and they look stuck. Then someone else just says, just take a step. And I know they mean well, but if it were that simple, wouldn't we have done it already? Right? Nobody is standing frozen in front of a doorway thinking, you know what would be fun today? Becoming a human traffic cone. Not a chance. Freezing is not a choice. It's a disconnect. The brain is trying to start or continue a movement, but the body is not responding the way it should. And that can happen even when the person is fully alert, fully aware, and fully annoyed. Actually, especially annoyed. Because when your feet freeze, your brain often keeps working. You know you need to move. You know people might be waiting. You know the doorway is not a mountain. You know the kitchen is right there. You can see it. You can almost touch it. But your feet are locked. Now, it's not laziness, and that's not fear by itself. That's Parkinson's interfering with movement. And when people misunderstand that, it adds pressure. And pressure makes freezing worse. Because now you're not just trying to move. You're trying to move while feeling watched and feeling rushed and embarrassed and judged. And that's a lot. That is not a walking situation anymore. That is a live performance that you didn't audition for. So mistake number 1 is thinking freezing is a choice, because it's not a choice. And if you live with someone who freezes, one of the most helpful things you can do is stop saying, just move or just walk. Try giving space. Try staying calm. Try asking what helps. Because just move or just walk, that's not a strategy. It's a sentence that sounds helpful until Parkinson's laughs at it in the hallway. And if you ever had someone say just walk or just move, drop a me too in the comments. Not because we're trying to complain. Although honestly, sometimes a little group complaining is medically underrated. Okay? But because someone else reading those comments might realize, okay, this isn't just me. All right, mistake number 2. It's trying to force your way through it. Now, this one is tricky because when freezing happens, your natural instinct is to fight it. You want to push harder. You want to muscle through it. You want to tell your feet, listen here, little traders, we're walking today. And I get it, because freezing feels ridiculous. It feels like your body is disobeying you. So you try harder, you lean forward, you tense up, you push, you panic a little. And sometimes the harder you try, the more stuck you feel. It's like your brain gets caught in a loop. Go, can't go. Try harder, still can't go. Now panic. Wonderful. Very helpful, brain. Thank you for your leadership. The problem is that forcing it can sometimes make the freeze feel bigger, especially if you're already stressed, rushed, tired, or in a tight space. So instead of fighting the freeze head on, sometimes the better move is to reset, to pause, to breathe, shift your weight, look somewhere else, give your brain a different cue. That might mean counting. It might mean saying 1, 2, step. It might be stepping over an imaginary line. It might mean rocking gently side to side before stepping. It might mean using rhythm. It might mean asking someone to give you a calm cue instead of grabbing you. The key is this. A freezing episode is not always something that you can bully your way through. Sometimes you have to interrupt it, not with panic, with a cue. And that's hard because freezing usually shows up at the worst possible times, doesn't it? Doorways, crowds, turning, tight spaces, or when someone's behind you with a shopping cart and the emotional patience of a wet squirrel. And you know who you are. But if forcing it makes you more tense, the freeze may dig in deeper. So mistake number 2 is trying to force your way through the freeze instead of resetting it and using a cue. Because sometimes Parkinson's does not need more pressure. Sometimes it needs a pattern interrupt. Okay, and don't forget, stay with me because at the end, near the end, I'm going to give you a simple sentence that you can use to explain freezing to people who think you're just hesitating or not trying. And that sentence matters because the right words can take some of the pressure out of the moment. And freezing does not need more pressure. It already brought its own little circus. Okay, mistake number 3 is ignoring your freezing triggers. Now, freezing can feel random, and sometimes it really does seem to come out of nowhere. But for a lot of people, freezing has patterns. Doorways are a big one. Turning is another. Crowded spaces, narrow spaces. It's basically Parkinson sees a simple movement and says, what if we made this a group project? And then everything gets complicated. Now, the mistake is assuming freezing is just one big random monster. Because if you don't look for triggers, you can't prepare for them. Now, I'm not saying you can control everything. You can't. Parkinson's loves surprise parties, and unfortunately, you are always the venue. But if you start noticing patterns, you may be able to plan better. This is where tracking matters too, right? I know, here we go again, tracking. I'm becoming the guy at the party that no one invited because he brought the notebook, but this stuff really matters. You need to write down when your freezing happens. Where were you? What were you doing? Were you turning? Were you rushing? Were you tired? Were your meds wearing off? Was there a doorway involved? Crowds, those details can show you a pattern. And patterns are powerful because once you see the pattern, you can stop treating every freeze like a mystery novel where the suspect is always my stupid feet. And if you're finding value in this, do me a quick favor, hit subscribe. That's it. Quick and painless. No dramatic pledge. No tiny contract written by YouTube lawyers. Just hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because we're building a library here for people living real life with Parkinson's. And if freezing is something you deal with, drop the word frozen in the comments. Just one word, frozen. That tells me this topic matters. And it tells someone else they're not standing in its doorway alone. All right, mistake number 3 is ignoring your freezing triggers. Because freezing may feel random, but sometimes it's a pattern trying to get your attention. Now, mistake number 4 is not having cueing tricks ready before you need them. Here's the thing about freezing. The middle of a freezing episode, that is not the ideal time to start inventing a plan. It's like waiting until the smoke alarm goes off to Google, what is fire? Right? And you want your cueing tricks ready before the freeze happens. Because when you freeze, your brain may already be in overload. You may feel embarrassed. You're going to feel rushed. Someone may be talking to you. Someone may be waiting. Your body may be stiff. And now you're supposed to calmly invent a strategy. Good luck. That's when your brain opens 13 tabs, freezes, and then plays elevator music. And you don't even know which tab it's coming from. So it helps to have a few cues ready. Like simple ones, not an Olympic routine. For some people, counting helps. For some, a visual cue helps, right? Stepping over a line on the floor, a cane, a laser, a tile crack, an imaginary line. For some people, though, weight shifting helps. Side to side, reset, and then step. Now, not every cue works for every person, and not every cue works every time, because Parkinson's is nothing if not committed to being inconsistent. But the point is not to find one magic trick. The point is to build a toolbox and practice the cues when you're not frozen. And that part matters because if you only try the cues during a crisis, it may not come naturally. Practice it in a safe space. Practice stopping, resetting, and starting again. And not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're giving your brain another route. So, mistake number 4 is not having cueing tricks ready before you need them. Freezing is hard enough. Don't make yourself build the parachute before you've already jumped. And remember that sentence I promised you, it's still coming. Because sometimes you don't just need a cue for your feet. Sometimes you need a cue for the people around you too. You need language that explains what's happening without turning the moment into a full documentary called Bryce and the Doorway of Doom. And if you watched last episode, you know what I mean by that documentary. Thank you, Carmen. Okay, mistake number 5. Now, that's letting embarrassment keep you silent. Now, this one might be the hardest because freezing isn't not just physical. It can be humiliating, right? You freeze in a store, in a restaurant, or in a doorway. You freeze while people are behind you, and suddenly you feel like everyone's watching. And even if they're not watching, it sure feels like they are. So you start hiding it. You start avoiding places. You start avoiding crowds. You start avoiding situations where you may freeze, or you laugh it off and you say, I'm fine. You pretend you just stopped on purpose. Oh, yes, I always pause dramatically in doorways. It's part of my brand. But inside, you're frustrated, right? And maybe scared, probably scared. Because freezing can shake your confidence. It can make you feel unsafe. It can make your world smaller. And if people around you do not understand it, it can make you feel even more alone. And that's why explaining it matters. Not to everyone. You don't owe every stranger in aisle 7 a TED talk on the brain. But the people close to you should understand that freezing, what it is and what helps. Your partner, your family, your friends, the people you spend time with. Because if you don't understand freezing, they may accidentally make it worse. They may rush you. They may grab your arm. They may tell you to hurry. They may say, just move. And again, they mean well. But grabbing someone who's frozen can throw them off balance. Trust me, been there, done it. If you've been there, done it, say, been there, done it in the comments. And rushing them can increase panic. Crowding them can make the freeze worse. So people need to know, give me space, give me a second, use a calm cue, don't pull me, don't panic, don't make it a scene. And if you're the care partner, one of the best things you can do is ask ahead of time, what helps you when you freeze? Do you want me to say anything? Do you want to count down? Do you want space? That conversation is much easier before the freeze happens. Because during that freeze, nobody needs a family meeting. They need calm. They need dignity. They need room to reset. So, mistake number 5 is letting embarrassment keep you silent. Because when people understand freezing, they're more likely to support you instead of accidentally adding any pressure. And pressure is not what freezing needs. Freezing needs calm. And maybe a little less commentary from the peanut gallery. And don't go anywhere because Carmen's Care Partner Corner is coming up. And right after that, I'm going to give you that exact sentence. The one you can use with your family, friends, care partners, or anyone who sees you freeze and thinks you're just standing there by choice. Because sometimes the right sentence can save you from having to explain your entire nervous system in the middle of the hallway. And that brings us now to Carmen's Care Partner Corner. Now, here's what Carmen said when we talked about this episode. From the care partner side, freezing can be scary. because you can see the person wants to move, but their body's just not cooperating. And your first instinct may be to help quickly. You may want to grab their arm or pull them forward or say, come on, just step. But that can make things worse. The biggest thing is to stay calm. Because if the care partner panics, the person freezing may panic too. And then everything gets harder. Ask before it happens what helps. Maybe they want a verbal cue. Maybe they need space. Maybe they want you to count. Maybe they want you to stand quietly beside them. But just don't assume. And don't turn the freeze into a public announcement. The person's probably already embarrassed. They probably already know people might be watching. So protect their dignity. Give them time. Give them space. And remember, freezing is not them being difficult. It's Parkinson's interrupting movement. Support the person. Don't fight the symptom. Wow, Carmen, thank you. I love that. Especially that line, support the person. Don't fight the symptom. Because when someone freezes, they don't need a drill sergeant. They need a safe place to reset. And if you're the person freezing, it's okay to tell people what helps. It's not being difficult. That's giving instructions to the people who love you so they don't accidentally make this moment harder. Now, Carmen just talked about helping people understand freezing. So let's get to that sentence that I promised you at the start. Because sometimes freezing, it's really hard to explain. So if you just say, I stopped walking, people don't understand that. If you say, my feet get stuck, they may think you mean physically stuck. And if you say, my brain says go, but my feet don't listen, that's actually pretty close, but we can make it even clearer. So here is the sentence I would use. When I freeze, I'm not choosing to stop. My brain is having trouble starting the movement, and I may need a second or a cue or a space to reset. Let me say it again. When I freeze, I'm not choosing to stop. My brain is just having trouble starting the movement, and I may need just a second, a cue, or just some space to reset. That sentence does three things. It tells people that it's not a choice. It explains the movement problem simply, and it tells them what might help, a second, a cue, or space. And if you want to say it to your doctor, you can use this version. I'm noticing freezing episodes when, especially for what seems to help is, here's an example. I'm noticing freezing when I go through doorways, especially when I'm rushed or turning. And what seems to help is counting before I step. That gives your doctor timing, a trigger, and response. And that is much better than trying to remember everything after the fact while sitting in the appointment thinking, I know something happened. My brain has placed details in a locked filing cabinet and swallowed the key. Better information creates a better conversation, and a better conversation leads to better support. And that brings me to today's Bryce-ism. And if you're ready, here you go. Parkinson's freezing is your brain yelling, go, while your feet stand there like they're waiting for written permission from the head office. And apparently, head office is closed for lunch. Freezing is not failure. It is your signal to pause, reset, and find another way forward. Well, if this video helped you, hit that like button. Not for me, but for the person sitting at home embarrassed because they froze in public and thought they were the only one. Or for the care partner who keeps saying, just walk, because nobody ever explained what freezing really feels like. One click helps YouTube show this video to them. And in the comments, tell me this. Do you deal with freezing? And if you do, what is your biggest trigger? Doorways, turning, crowds, rushing, tight spaces, or does it feel random? And if you have a cue that helps you, please share it. Drop that in the comments because your comments might help somebody else get unstuck. And as always, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the community. It means so much to me. And until next time, I want you to keep showing up. I want you to keep being real. And I want you to keep doing life today. I love you so much, and I will see you on the next episode.